Hemshech Chaim Beis, Volume 1, the middle of chapter 150, where he's explaining the Aveda, and Avedas Hashem, in our service, in our work, in our effort, the concept that he's been discussing before about the difference between Atzilus for Atzilus, Atzilus for Biyah. In other words, as we will learn later, how contemplation, Meichen, leads to Midas. So contemplation on the divine is going to awaken a Seiris, awaken and arouse feelings, if it's a proper contemplation. The contemplation is, in general, Anisavis Yesh Ma'ayin. Close your eyes and meditate on the idea of how matter comes into being from a state that is beyond matter. A state of energy, a state of divine energy, which is in simple terms, Yesh Ma'ayin. And the Yesh itself, matter itself, the matter of this universe dictates that it could not have made itself, that there is a source for it, that creates it, brings it into being. Actually, the word create can be somewhat misleading because we use it so often, we don't even know what it means. I think it's almost like a metamorphosis from a state of total energy to matter. But not physical energy, but spiritual energy or divine energy. But the real details come in the next step, which is the Hisbonus Pratis, of what is this energy like? What is this divine energy? What is the ayin like? So though it's beyond us, but he says it's not totally beyond us, because the ayin goes through a progression that we can identify with, and there's some relationship between us and that ayin, because it brought us into being. So there's some type of kiruv, not like atzmus that's completely removed. And he explained that all this is the Hisbonus of Baruch She'amar. So we say Baruch She'amar v'haya elam. If you think a moment those words, what are you saying? That Baruch, blessed is the one that said and brought existence into being. It's almost like envisioning the Big Bang, if you want to put it that way. It's envisioning how, from a state of total divine reality, a desire, She'amar, for V'haya Elam begins. Where is that exactly placed? He said that's either the Amira of Ak, so as I said, the blueprint. From the blueprint, bringing it into a structure, so you have a blueprint. But now, that now you want actually from the blueprint, you should actually begin building. Or higher, it's Malchus the Ein Sof. Malchus the Ein Sof, Lifnei HaTzimtzum, that's where the whole thing is envisioned. The truth is, when we learned earlier, and that's what I mentioned, there's really a third interpretation, even higher than Malchus of Ein Sof, as he spoke about in chapter 69 and on, that the true Baruch She'amar v'haya elam, the Mittler Rebbe says, and the Rebbe Rashab quotes him, it has to be in a place before there was even a desire. The root of Baruch She'amar v'haya elam is the first time in a divine, let's call it indivisible and all-encompassing reality, there should be a desire. Right, in the complete stillness there should be a desire, in that field of energy there should be some type of a desire. It's not even, as he calls it there, it's not even a conscious one, meaning he's not even known to himself, just the mere stirring. That is the first Baruch She'amar v'haya elam. And then Baruch Hu, he says there's already a Gili La'atzmei, so it's only Hu, means only, we only know of it but we can't relate to it directly. And then comes Baruch Eisa V'Eisa, which is the Shir Atzmei B'Kayach, that actually he allocates and says, okay, this is what I want to have, 10 hidden spheres. So in the root of roots, it's really in that deepest place. For some reason, he's not mentioning that here. Here he only goes to Malchus Ein Sof. So I was thinking, either Malchus Ein Sof includes, in general, that all those levels. That's really what he means. Or you can break it down further, just like as he's talking Malchus. As Malchus of Ak becomes a Keser for Atzilus, and Malchus of Ein Sof becomes a Keser for Ak. So bottom line, it all travels through Malchus. But if you want to go really more subtly, it actually begins not a Malchus of Ein Sof, which is already Baruch Eimer V'Eisa. It begins 2 levels before that, as we learned. So Malchus of Ein Sof is actually the 3rd level in this context. But he's not mentioning that here directly. As I said, I'm not sure why. Either because he's including it in Malchus Ein Sof, or because there's actually, you could break it down even to a 3rd level, which he doesn't go into here. maybe because it's not possible to be mizbainin into it. Maybe that's why he's talking about his bonus here, because there's no his bonus in a place that doesn't have yet even any type of reality. Here, at least we're talking about something that God, at least God is conscious. In the divine consciousness, there's at least a connection. Maybe that may be it. Huh?
It makes a lot of
that resonates.
Sounds plausible.
Okay. So bottom line is, all this is meant to be a meditation, a contemplation of when you're davening, of not just that existence has a source, but you're actually thinking of how that source evolved and how it transformed or desired and turned into, as you said, a continuous gradation, madrega madrega, until this ayin eliki actually gives life and sustenance to existence. So that's this bonus he calls. This is bonus, he says, will create chkikim bachutz. This chisels and refines the sharp edges of our personalities. That means hadei's bonus, but hagish benafshei, b'frat be'echus. Especially when you think of the quality of this ayin eliki. Here are the words: miskarav me'ed lelakus. I'm reading on page 294. V'nitik mikol inyanim achunim. He gets very close to godliness and severs, gets cut off or separates himself from all the coarse matter things. And he goes out, he leaves, he departs, divest is not the right word, it's not divest. Divest is, it's a word, but yetz is more, he abandons. And he leaves from his present state, from his previous state rather, and elevates to a far higher level. Now starts the discussion, how do you do chkikim b'fnim? That's chkika b'chutz. That's a refinement of pulling him out from the crassness, and his mind and his heart have carried him now to a place of far more refined, because he's gone back, so to speak, into the engine room that created matter in the first place. And that's where he's focusing, that the real power is the ayin eliki, that's the ikir, that gives, that brings sustenance into being. Chkika b'fnim, he says, and this is what we're in the middle of, this is this bonus bechinas hagilish be'elmas. In other words, not just the bringing existence into being, the yesh into being, and all the details of that, and all the levels, is the gili be'elmas. What does that mean? Eir v'chayis alikem mislabish b'teichem atem achayim as kulam, right? So he says, just like the yesh cannot create itself, same thing, the life force that gives it life, dynamic, that we are walking and breathing, not just that we exist, that there's a life force, also cannot have come on its own. What we see from our own flesh, that a person senses a soul, a life that is giving him life, and that's the primary force of life. And if it's removed, all that's left is a corpse, is an inanimate daimon, an inanimate entity, body. Same thing we understand with the world, that the fact the world is a dynamic world is not on its own. It comes from, as he calls it, Shem Elokim Emes, Hu Elokim Chaim. What does that mean? Real existence is the domain of only one entity of all and everything, Atzmos. It's the only entity that's real. Why is it real? Because nothing put it there. It was not placed there by any cause. It's causeless. As soon as an existence has a cause, it's already not Emes Lamite. You can't call it total truth because it wouldn't be there without its cause. So it doesn't have any true integrity and value of its own, inherent. It's because something wanted it there. That's why it's there. Atzmus is no such thing, because Atzmus is a reality that is Mitzusim Atzmusei, a reality because he's real. Simple as that. We discussed that a little more yesterday, another class. So that's Kiyum Nitzchi. Now, so our existence, material existence, is definitely not emes in that way. So it has to come, something has to give it validity, something has to give it reality. So that's Atzmus. But he does it through a process called Eir. Eir carries that power of Atzmus. What is Eir? So he says Eir, because it's Dovuk, it's completely connected to Atzmus, it's not anything outside of it. It B'meila also has Kiyum Nitzchi, because it's Meina Etzem. And that's the words of Hu Kayim U'Shmoi Kayim. So again, Kayim. Not just the domain of Hu, but also Shmoi. That's Eir. And he says there's a difference. There's two ways you could explain this dveikus. One is that it's constantly connected, Dovik be'etzem, as he calls it, fundamentally, it's just simply, it's so so selfless and so lack of personality that all it is an extension of Atzmus. That's all it is. So it carries a dovik. Or that Dveikus is chadash every second. In other words, it's constantly being renewed from that source. But that's also Dveikus. And therefore, that's just an aside. Therefore, it has the chayis lahachis. That's why it has the power to give life into existence. And if for a moment that energy would leave, everything would stop being. Now he seems to, as we said, we discussed, seems to go back to not discuss only the life force. He's talking about the actual sustenance too. So he says, not like chayes haguf, where in other words, there's two energies basically. The energy in the body that keeps the body sustaining is one thing. There's another energy that's the soul. The soul doesn't create the body. But even that he says, nevertheless, even the sustenance of the body itself also is carried through the neshama, and the sustenance of existence, meaning it's mir yesh, is also carried through the chayes. So the bottom line is, this contemplation is focusing on the dynamic energy, and he says that's not negated to the contemplation. This point I just made, he says, so in this chika b'fnim, this internal chiseling, internal shaping and planing, and what did I say, chiseling, also another word, I don't say engraving, it's carving out, purifying, refining, is a different isbonus. This isbonus is far more premiistic because it's talking about the gili in existence. He still hasn't spelled, but we'll spell it out as we go further, but this is where we're at. So if you were thinking about the two contemplations, it would be like this. The first contemplation, Baruch Sha'amar, and those steps, is thinking how a completely, what's the word I want to use? Matterless, a complete substanceless ayin, a state of a field of energy, of divine energy, envisioned and chose to bring into being pop, yeshmayin, something of matter. So it's an actual isbonus. You can think of that process. As I said, thinking of the first bang, thinking how from ruchnius became gashmis, or how from ayin became yesh. Which is not an easy thing to think about, but it definitely takes you to another plane. It makes you understand that existence is not where it didn't begin here. So you're thinking about the step before it became what we see. It doesn't say it specifically, but you can apply this even to yourself as an individual. You once didn't exist. How did from that nothing come you? What happened? And I'm talking about the life. I'm not talking about just the physical. So you could even think of it from the point of view of how something before was a seed became a seed, which then grew into a tree. That state, from you look at Earth, someone puts a seed in there, something happens that turns an ayin into a yesh, energy into matter, if you want to put it. But it's not even energy as we understand. It's not subatomic energy. It's spiritual energy. It's divine energy. It's a divine force, and suddenly matter emerged from that.
It's a klal for all the statements after it, or is it a top level and down?
Both. Then the second isbonus here is not on that, on the Big Bang, on the first so-called emergence. Now we're talking about how that force energizes existence. That's what he's saying here. How it enters and energizes and gives life to us. Because that too cannot come from us. That also comes from that source. And he points out as an aside, that energy also happens to bring the sustenance. The first thing also comes through, basically carries both things. The mere existence and also the force, the dynamic element that makes it alive. That makes it dynamic, energized. But there, the focus is primarily on the chayis aliki, that's within it all. And we'll soon see how that leads to a deeper type of refinement, or inner refinement, as opposed to the first one. So we'll talk about that more as we go here. Let's go further now. So here the ikar is bonus, as I'm starting with ikar is bonus. Who shakol nivre yesh by v'chayis aliki amachaya esay. that every creature has in it an er v'chayis, an energy, a life force that energizes it. U'sha'ikru ha'er eliki. And the primary element in this entity is really the er eliki, not its body, not its substance, not what you see. Like we said before, that when like in the nefesh, what's the primary force that makes you alive? Is this nefesh that's in your body. Now we read this already, but I want to just read it again. Through the contemplation and the profound, immersion. The profound,
Profound immersion.
Yes, profound immersion. So this is critical. It's not just to think about it makivdik, casually or superficially. You have to be hamakus hadas. Yugashin, that the thing should actually be felt in your soul. In other words, really think about what is the life force like. It's like closing your eyes and thinking, what is life like that is not body alone? What is this energy inside of us, inside of existence, that makes it come alive? Here he will be awakened, aroused, and with love. That he will love Hashem, which is that force, that life force, and desires to cleave to it. That means that his dvekas nafshe, his spirit, should be connected only to this divine energy. And he wants that this energy, this divine energy, should illuminate, radiate, reveal in the nefesh and in the world. And here he brought the example that we learned, which is very interesting. Like a person who feels and senses that the primary life force in him is his nefesh, his spirit. So he wants this Gilead nefesh. Who doesn't want? We want our nefesh to constantly be radiating. And this is not what we're talking about Kedusha here now. We're talking about we want the life force within us. Especially, specifically when he's weak and mu'una, what do we say? Afflicted. So when a person is weak, think about it. What do you feel like when you're weak? You feel deficient, and you would love to be able to say, I wish the energy would come back to me. You say, I wish I had more energy.
You feel drained of your energy.
Right, exactly, drained. And you want that energy back. And you take medication, or you exercise, or whatever it is, you rest to try to get it back. And everyone knows the feeling, because you're feeling down. So Bechlal, a person wants to have life force within them. But especially when you're feeling weak, then you sense the lack. So then you really desire it. It's a very tangible example that everyone can relate to. I think it's a big... Okay, so when it comes to our naturally, when we're weak, we don't need anyone, we don't need to learn Ayin Beis and Shulchan Aruch to tell us to desire life. It just comes, we want life. L'chaim, right? We want life. But when it comes to Ruchni, here you need Kashan Mevnu Margish. Here you need contemplation, because that's how God made it. He made it like Balditchever said.
That's in the books.
Yeah, that's in the books, and this says. So here you need to be maven, you need to understand. When you understand and feel, that there's a divine energy that gives us that energizes. And the main thing is elikus. Same way. So what's missing is we don't feel like the body and soul. The body knows and feels. We feel the soul, and we need to have that soul energy, and we want to have it. And it affects us because we feel stronger when we have it. Here, you need the contemplation to know that it's as important and that it's your primary force. That's the challenge. That's why there's his bonus. But he says with his bonus you can get there. Yeah.
And that's why it makes you Egler.
He didn't get to that yet. That's going to be, of course, the conclusion. Well, Befrat, and same here's a Befrat. Just like there, Cholosh Mu'una, what is it in spiritual, in the spiritual level? Befrat, Beriboy Ha'alomash, She'ena Ereliki Nigla, that's the equivalent. When you see Halamas. So when actually this thing itself, when you don't feel it, that alone is telling you, when there's a concealment, that you don't feel this divine energy. So as you're feeling spiritually weak, so to speak. He's even more, what do we say, desiring, longing, Tov. Tov is Evian Tov l'chol davar. It's a very deep hunger. It's someone that is like desperately Tov is the deepest type of longing possible. So it's more than that's when you say Tov. You don't say Tshuka. You don't say Ratzon. Tov is a very deep, desperate longing. Evian Tov, what's the lashon? Evian Tov l'chol davar. A true pauper is just like it's like a person who has nothing, so he wants everything. You know, Tov. Ta'oven is from the same root of ta'oven?
Yeah.
No, but ta'oven is aberration. Ta'oven is more of a negative. Okay, but fine. A taiva.
No, the oven is on the table.
No.
The Tevon is the same.
The te'avon?
That's the
That's
same.
a
Like-
modern Hebrew word.
Maybe with the te'avon means bon appetit, means... no, te'avon means also, it means that should be, you should digest well.
Good appetite.
It is, yeah, an appetite for everything. You could say an appetite for everything. But here it's stronger. It's a tone. Okay, now we continue. So here we have it. So now what's happened, this is bonus, and that you know this life force is the main thing that keeps you going. So you tav for it. Okay. So it's an edel is bonus. Ubayeser, and increasingly so, or even moreover, or more so, kashem is beinen be'efena era chayes alaki. So whatever we said now, he's now going even further. That when you contemplate in the efen, the way this life, this energy and life force, divine life force in the worlds, the gam zem that this also we have from our flesh we can behold. So he keeps using here because everything here is examples now from our nefesh and guf.
That's the contemplation.
That's what that did not exist in the first contemplation. That was chik b'chutz, because there you're talking about bringing something into existence. The nefesh doesn't bring the guf into existence, so that doesn't work there. You can't have b'psari echzalaka in the first contemplation. Here you could, because we have an example of a life force that we want to have, we want to connect with, because we want life force. So that's more, doesn't use the word makiv, but it's definitely more general. That's why it probably doesn't bring a mid of ava, it just brings a kiruv.
It means in your flesh beholds or your flesh beholds?
From it.
From my flesh. It can mean many things. It means a flesh is an example. The flesh is the best example for our godliness. Chassidus explains it in the fullest sense, that our flesh is a reflection created in the divine image. So here it goes. We also see. So now the befrat is now going to be the efen air. So what did we learn before till now? From Psari Echzalaka we know what? That there's a chayis in existence, and that's the primary thing, and we desire it, especially when there's a lack. Now he's going further. How does that life force energize us? So also we're going to learn this from ourselves, and we're going to extrapolate it back to the divine energy. What's the efen? See the efen, ha'er eliki. The gamzam, the kamoi benefesh. Here goes first. He starts with nefesh, psari, just like in the nefesh in our soul. Yesh naran she benefesh. It has nefesh, ruach, and neshama. It has 3 levels. Kamoi kem belikus is gam kem b'chinas naran hamislabish be'elamas. The same thing in the likus. There's also naran. 3 levels that manifest in the worlds. V'adei hasogas in yonim elu benefesh yevin kamei kem belikus. So now we have a parallel here. So just as we'll understand it through the nefesh, as we understand it in Alakus. It's very precise here.
So the nefesh, the naran.
It feels good when you think like, they're on the same page here. The Rebbe Hashab is applying himself.
Meditation.
Yeah?
But the naran is the psari echza.
What do you mean by that?
I'm saying normally
Everything is Psari echza.
Normally in the psari echza, like you see your fingers move, you know there's chayes, whatever.
The Psari echza and
everybody experiences their naran like in a very understood way.
let's see what he says here about it. I'm not sure. Well, maybe after this we'll understand it. The Psari echza is going on everything. It means everything reflects in our own being. Here he doesn't mean Bipsari as in flesh as opposed to spirit. He means in our lives. Bipsari meaning from us, our basar. The thing, how it's in our being, so to speak.
It means how it is.
It's also flesh, but it's not only. It doesn't just
How
mean
it
it
is in
purely.
reality. We know that in reality there's not anshem
In
benefit.
other words, he's not saying mipsadi like from the 5 fingers we learn there's 5 spheres or something. He's talking about in how nefesh fits in a guf, in basar. That's how we learn elokah. Huh?
No, I'm saying no. We know in reality that there's not anshem benefit. We know that there's not anshem.
Well, we know it as much as we know there's naran elokus. They told us.
That's basically what he's saying.
No, but
Basically
no.
what he's saying.
No, but we have a naran in the nefesh we can relate to. He's meichin midis. 1 second. Let's learn. He's with middle of an Indian. What? Maybe he doesn't say it. Maybe we'll need to explain. Let's see. And through this contemplation, there'll be the love and attraction and desire, increasing love and desire. That he wants and desires godliness and the revelation of the energy. Not the way it's obvious and revealed in the world. What do we see now? We just see yeshus. We see everything as self-absorbed, self-contained entities. Like the Baditcher said. And the divine energy is not revealed. You know what he said? That what's the kunst? You give them Elam Hazah to experience, and you put about the Elam Haba, Ruchnius in books. Do the opposite, and you'll see how they'll behave. So here's what you want, but you want to challenge the status quo. The status quo is the yesh dominates and the lakus is concealed. But now that you're contemplating that's really it's the opposite. Now we worship the glove. But now that you recognize there's a hand inside the glove, you want to connect to that. You realize that's the primary. And not that the glove is the dominant element here. We live in a world where the tools dictate what should be done with tools. Imagine the hammer telling the hand what to do. Your body is telling your soul where to go. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm this, I want that, I want what. You want the other way around. You want the soul telling the body where to go, not the other way. But that comes after contemplation and knowing that that's the Iker Chai is coming from there. Rather, he wants his desire to be Gila Edaliki, not the Yesh dominates. He wants the Gila Edaliki. Okay, Hitaka did not say what Naran is, so I'll say a few things about it. First of all, if you go back, those chapters, I think like Ayin Gimel or something like that, he talked there about Naran as the 3 levels of Adenu, Zenu, Tumiz Gavenu, and what was it? Magin Yeshenu. So he explained there, if you remember, Naran in Aveda, and he also explained Naran in Tshuva, 3 levels of Tshuva. So briefly, Naran is Nefesh, Neshama is Meichin, is the part of the soul that manifests in intelligence. Ruach is the part is Midas, and Nefesh is mostly Nehi. It's Chabad Chagas Nehi essentially of the Nefesh. The three different levels. So when you contemplate how it is by us, and we clearly see that there are 3 levels of the soul. There's one soul, but it has dimensions how it manifests. So then you could apply the same thing that Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. The Elam is what's that? It's usually Bri Yitzir Asiyah. So you can contemplate from yourself, you extrapolate that the same 3 levels exist in the divine. So now you're not just focusing that there's a life energy, a dynamic energy within us. You're also talking about levels of that energy. So he says that helps. In other words, the key point here is that the more detail your contemplation, the more effect it's going to have on you. If you keep it too general, like you just say God exists, it's too meaningless. When you understand the Isbannus here is a detailed contemplation of what kind of godliness this is, what level it is, how it fits, what it does. Like he's saying, the muchus, before he spoke about the muchus ayin alaki, that we think about also the quality of the energy. And now he's talking about how that energy manifests in existence in a revealed way, that we sense a life force, and that life force has levels. That's what ultimately brings the Serus that he's talking about. So that's a critical component here, which is true. It's in the details. The details is what really brings it alive in your life. Because if you stick without details, it becomes just some type of like I said, mathematical thing. The details is the key, because then you really appreciate it. It's like when you love something. If you really want to love something, you have to relate to the details. It's just not, you don't just love a general thing. It's the individual details and traits and qualities that ultimately connect you, that keep you connected. Maybe that's why Chikka B'chutz is more a kiruv klali, because there you're talking about he's bringing it into existence. Here you're talking about how he actually interacts with you. It's like when we say in davening, God gives you health, He gives you food. It's far different than when you're just saying God gives us everything. The details is where you begin to have a relationship. Because you say, okay, I can relate to that, I can relate to this. I can relate to God's chesed, I can relate to God's gvura. I can relate to God's tiferes. You begin to have a relationship with something on our terms. If you just speak in general, okay, there's one God and He's up there somewhere, He's giving us life. When you understand that God manifests in... It's almost like the spheres, actually as I think about it, it's almost like the spheres itself. The spheres become handles with which we can hold on and talk about something. We could say we have wisdom, so we relate to God's wisdom. I'm learning Torah, I'm learning God's wisdom. I'm doing tzedakah, I'm emulating God's chesed. Mahu chanun afata chanun. So in other words, there becomes a distinct key relation. Remember, he kept saying how the ayin applies itself and has a relationship with the yesh. Talk about Atzmus. Atzmus, okay, Atzmus created it all. Great. It's completely beyond us. But I want a relationship. You want a relationship, you need to have what to hold on to. You need a handle. We are people of structure. We're people of details. So structure needs to have something to talk about. And if you don't have that, you don't have real detailed relationship. It would be like having a relationship with something that is so beyond us.
That's a very interesting take on that. I don't think I've ever heard that the spheres are like handles, something to... I think you brought it down someplace.
Yeah, it's clear. Maybe I never put it this way, but it's very clear that's what the spheres accomplish.
Putting it that way just like sheds a different type of light on it.
Okay, good. See, the kick is happening. It's true.
Slow and painful.
There's nothing. That's why I say there's no way. Chassidus is impossible to understand quickly. There's no way you can read this quickly. It's real, very meticulous, because that's exactly it. You got to know. It's like you really care about something. You want to know every specific detail. You don't just, write. This is personal, and personal is a relationship. Relationship is every step of the way. I mean, you see here. Imagine skipping 5 lines here. What would happen? You wouldn't be able to get anything because he's building. Look, especially this chapter. I see this chapter as an unbelievable chapter because if you think about it personally, it's like the Rebbe Rashab is applying himself and literally telling us the method. Till here, he's talking the concept. Here he's talking methodology here. This is real method.
It's applied.
Yeah.
Applied.
He's telling you what he does, in a sense, when he sits with under a talus and film. What you think about. I mean, if you take this question, this makes me have a taiva to sit down with the talus and film and just think it through. Pretty cool stuff. What can I tell you? It's a different type of taiva. You won't stop me?
Maybe you should summarize this chapter before you.
He did. He did a very good job of that.
He did. Have it all. Has to summarize.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
It's a very fundamental chapter. Even though this chapter is about Avodas Hashem, and you could think it's like just it actually gives.
Yeah.
But even Geschmacker is.
It means written when you put it on.
I will. I do that.
It's up to me. I agree with you. Maybe you should do this chapter as like a summary written before.
This deserves more than a summary. This is a real detailed.
I've been looking for something like this for years.
No, it's amazing because you could see speaking about his bonus, one's bonus and another one, and chutz and pnim, and now the pnimi. It's like a very. What's even richer, what's even reicher, what's even more powerful is this is bringing together everything we've been learning, Sol Sabla and Tfuna and all that in practice. This is application. This is real application of that. He didn't connect it yet, but he's going to.
Is this found other places in the series like this? Such detail?
There is in Kutus Aveda they talk similar to this, but you see the thing there. Everywhere else it's pieces. It's like self-contained. It's 5 pages, 10 pages, 20 pages, 30 pages maximum. Here it's relentless. This is like it's an onslaught, a good one, assault on Elam Hazard. This, the broad context, the scope of this is just it's unreal. It's like a complete. Look at this. We're just in the middle of volume 1, and the Rebbe Rashab is all one flow. Obviously, he goes from one subject to another, but it's all intertwined. It's all one big puzzle. There's nothing like this close to this. Samach Vov is an unbelievable hemshech, obviously. The Rebbe calls it. But the Rebbe calls the Ayin Beis Neflois, even compared to the Neflois of Samach Vav. It's a very big statement. Samach Vav is considered to be like the top of the top. If this is Neflois compared to that, what does it mean? You can only appreciate it when you're really learning it the way we're learning it. You have to just keep going. Because it's not a page, it's whether there's such detail. I have to go back to the rest of Chassidus, because honestly, once you relearn this, it's like once you lift 1,000 pounds and you go back to lift 200 pounds, it's a whole different experience. I would have to go back to those moments, to be honest. I have like a whole different look on everything now. I'd like to go back. I do go back from time to time. When I learn those Maimorim, it's a whole different way you look at it, because this is so comprehensive. Not that those Maimorim are not a part of the picture too. And those Maimorim I see almost as being like addendums to this, now that all this is here. So I would definitely look. That's why I do a lot of research of the sources, because I want to see how this is stated elsewhere. So this chapter I haven't yet reached that. And I want to find where these ideas are elsewhere. But I'm sure they are. In Kuntres Aveda, I'm almost sure he talks about the Hizbonus. Kuntres Atfilah as well. And then there are places. There are different places. I don't recall such a detail in the 2 days, but that recalling doesn't mean it's not there. It could be at this point I gotten spoiled, so I don't remember exactly. I mean, I mark here, and also online the sources for each of the chapters and where it comes from, etc. To me, that's a critical. If you really want to appreciate it, you have to see the sources for this, like where the Alter Rebbe said this. The Alter Rebbe said ideas like this, but it's usually far briefer. My guess is what we're reading here is very brief in the Alter Rebbe, and Mittler Rebbe a little more, and the Rebbe Rashab is expounding on it. That's my guess, that this chapter is based on that.
Peter Rebbe and the Rebbe somehow incorporate this, especially this chapter, Nun.
The Rebbe for sure doesn't have such arichus, because his Maimorim are not like this. The Rebbe's Maimorim are far more, not necessarily. The Rebbe's Maimorim, they're Maimorim that are almost word for word from Ayin Beis, or from other Maimorim with additions here and there. There's no real rule. The Rebbe's Maimorim aren't necessarily deeper than this. It's not accurate to say that. I would say some sikhs of the Rebbe are far more deeper than the Maimorim. If you put in the context of pure Maimoric Chassidus, look, the Alter Rebbe established the whole Chabad, the map. The map is the Alter Rebbe's. That's down pat. And based on Eitz Chaim and the Kabbalah that came before him and what he learned from the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. That's clear. The Mittler Rebbe is an expansion of that in real, I would say, a philosophical and very like Bina. Takes the map and expands it in big time. The Tzemach Tzedek grounds it. He grounds everything back into he connects it to all the Maimor Chazal and the Gemara. The Alter Rebbe didn't explain always everything, how it's connected. He'll bring all the Gemaras on that subject and show how it all fits with Alter Rebbe's picture. It's a big chiddush of the Tzemach Tzedek. Besides, the Tzemach Tzedek also does a lot of reconciliation, like different Maimorim contradictions, like does energy have particles, does it not have? So he'll bring it all together and say, and this year the Alter Rebbe said according to this opinion, this year like that. He'll do a lot of he's a very thorough, he's like in that sense brings it all together and connects it also to Pshat Remez Drus Sod, which the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe for sure don't do as much. They do it, but very, very in brief. Tzemach Tzedek will really ground it. Tzemach Tzedek, of course, also has Maimorim where he expounds also on topics and asks questions and then goes deeper into things. But he grounds also. The Mittler Rebbe went away from the original language of the Alter Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek, in a sense, shows that. He says at times that the Teichen is like this, and he connects it back to the language of the Alter Rebbe. Yeah, but it's all one picture. There's no contradictions here. The Rebbe Marash begins to turn it into sugyas, sugya, into the sugya. How do you define a sugya? Topics, full topical elements. The Rebbe Marash started Hamshechin. He's the first one that has a Hemshech. Hemshech v'kocha, Hemshech Mayim Rabim, Hechrim, Chai Vadim Levorach, a bunch of Hemshechim, a flow. The Rebbe Rashab is the one that ultimately is like the Rambam. He takes it and turns it into, number one is, he takes all the Haskalas and philosophy ideas and turns them into very elaborate and very I would almost say that the Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek are like Rishonim, and the Rebbe Marash and Anan are Achreinim, in that way, if you could say that. What I mean by Achreinim, they don't come to create a new Chassidus. The Tzemach Tzedek really created the full organization of the Alter Rebbe's ideas and the Mittler Rebbe and so on. The Rebbe Marash and Anan, the Rebbe Rashab especially, they take it and turn it into something that we can relate to far more. You learn the same idea in the Alter Rebbe, you're hardly going to be able to derive the same. Like here, you see, he breaks down Eses Sfiras Hagnuzos into every detail. This doesn't exist in the previous ones. But it's based on Tzemach Tzedek's short. The Tzemach Tzedek will say sometimes in 5 lines, the Rebbe Rashab will take 5 pages, or 50 pages for that matter. But you have to see it in action. It's hard for me to explain it without to see it in actual action how a mimer is taken from there. The Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe primarily just developed things further. He took the ideas and went further with them. Some places explaining the Rebbe Rashab in far more detail. And the Rebbe I think the Rebbe is like a few things. First of all, the Rebbe added certain key chidushim in the general picture, in understanding the concepts. Secondly, the Rebbe also he added, he would say a mimer and he would ask questions on it, like he did with Bas Lagani. Look at Bas Lagani. It's a good example. Takes each chapter of the 20 chapters of Bas Lagani, which itself, Bas Lagani itself is based on the Rebbe Rashab. And you see what the Rebbe does. He takes his medayik. He takes a few lines and explains the general thing. So, it's a...
Yeah, the Tav is based on... Also the Maimon.
Yeah, so let's continue here. So that's Naran, fine. So what does it evoke? It evokes a desire that you want to have gili. You don't want helam. Remember we said, just like when you're weak and afflicted, you feel even more increasingly the need for the gili. Both there or one? Still one. The same thing. So he said, b'yeser, it's when the details. The b'yeser may be on that. Because when you know the details of Naran, that makes you want even more to have the gili. But no, it's not necessarily because of the helam. Okay. It sounds like, yes, it sounds like in general you want to have more, but also...
He says, and that, like you explained it.
I agree. So that, and through that, you want to have even more the gili, and not the helam. I'm just saying he's referring back to the helam again. You see, not like it is the Yeshus Ein Nigla. Sounds very much like we said, B'flat b'diba helam Shein Ki Nigla. So he's saying again that this makes you want it more and not to have the helam. Okay, it's fine. It's both. It's to have more gili and especially not to have the helam. Well, fine. Well, the pomim yiyim is benirus hanefesh, and at times now he's going the other side, which is okay. This sounds very nice. We meditate and contemplate on God's energy that you need it, just like we need a soul. You want it, but there's also another side. You don't always feel it. So here is also meridus. At times, this contemplation is going to bring you bitterness, sadness, certain sobriety, somberness.
Sobriety, yeah.
Sobriety and somberness is the same thing? No, not sobriety. Sobriety is like sober, like... No, not sobriety.
It's a very serious scenario.
Okay. Somber. I meant more...
Somber is sad.
Sad. Meridus, yeah. Sad.
Bitterness is different.
Atzvus is for sure not. Atzvus is depression. We're not talking. Atzvus is negative. He's talking meridus is not atzvus. Meridus is not bitterness like bitter people. Bitterness is a positive thing. It's a healthy sense, healthy pain, healthy
sense of deficiency,
of frustration, a healthy
disgust.
No, not disgust at all. That's mius. No. Don't even compare it to that. Meridus hanefesh is a very positive thing. It's a sadness. It's like when you cry because existence is lonely or something. You cry because God is not revealed. Why? That's the point. This contemplation, remember we said before, when it comes to the nefesh, no one needs to remind you. You don't need to learn Ayin Beis to tell you that when you're weak, you want to have soul energy inside of you. When it comes to, however, to Elokus and to the divine, there you need a contemplation. What does the contemplation want to achieve? That awakens in you a desire, a strong desire and hunger, longing as he said, a very desperate longing to want to have a gili. And not that the yeshus of the world dominates, but it's going to elicit another feeling as well. That the fact is, the Medidas, Masha Edom, we see in the world, Hepachem es Lagamri. After you contemplate this, you look around, you say, look at the world. Even while you're contemplating, you start thinking, look what money does to people. Look what this, all this is so true, that the chayes of the key is really the ikir, and look what the world is consumed with. That which is obvious in the world is completely opposite of the truth. How could that not cause you some pain if you're really contemplating on what the ikr is? It would be the equivalent, going back to the example, I want to use the Mepsari Echza, because he's using that very intensely. Imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, actually, people are doing it all the time. Imagine you having the eyes to see that people are physically killing themselves. That even though everybody wants health in the soul, and they're doing things to not let the flow of the life force. I'm not talking about ruchnis now. Simple the life force. Active, self-destructive behavior that is killing them. That you in your mind is very clear that they're going to die prematurely because of their behavior. So it's insanity, right? Because they're behaving, instead of recognizing that they need that life force, they're doing things that don't let that life force in. That would create a big medidus, hanefesh. Same thing here is anida be'elam uhepachem es lagamri. Because the world worships the glove, not the hand. The yeshus dominates. Ubiyeser, and increasingly so. Ma'ahesta shebenafshe. This is bichlal, the world. What is the world involved in? What is the world involved in? In their life force. And what gives them life and what sustenance and what sustains them? No. In themselves. And even more so, ma'ahesta shebenafshe. It's more personal. From the concealment, from the cover in his own nefesh, that he feels himself a lot more than he feels God. Would you all agree with that? Nobody.
That it causes merirus?
Nobody.
That's the fact.
Yeah, that causes merirus when you alzeh yismad me'eid benafshe. Read it's alzeh on this yismad me'eid benafshe, and this he's very bitter in his nefesh because he's thinking about it. In other words, we're not talking now whether you change it, but the fact that you're aware at least. Be aware at least. That's already a contemplation. The problem is most of us are not even aware of this statement. We don't even have a problem with it. He's saying the fact that the real life force is not as important to you as your own self. That's a good line. That I would frame. Mamashan. Let's say this again. That resonates, man. That's big time, right? So everybody, so we have unanimous agreement with this. In other words, there's no one that what's it called? We say in a board meeting, somebody
No objects.
objects. No one objects. Okay. It reminds me when the Rebbe spoke Sukkos about sleeping in a sukkah, Tov Shin Lamed, second day of Sukkos. So the Rebbe asked the whole question. So the Mittler Rebbe line that how could you sleep Makifim Debina and you're still wondering what Makifim Debina is. So that alone that you wonder causes you not to sleep, right? No. So the Rebbe said. So the Rebbe said, okay, the Mittler Rebbe held by that level. He felt Makifim Debina, but who else holds by that level? Who feels Makifim Debina? So the rest of the people could sleep peacefully. So the Rebbe says you have tsar over the fact that you don't feel it's makifim. Then the Rebbe went further. What happens if you don't have tsar over that? So he said you have tsar over the tsar that you don't have. And he says you keep going until you reach a level you can relate to. Tsar over the tsar over the tsar over the tsar that you don't have the tsar, you don't have the tsar, like that. I always use it because we do, let's say, Havdalah service, explain Havdalah. So one of the reasons we take psamim is, right, why do you take psamim? It's like smelling salts. To revive the nefesh that's about to faint after Shabbos leaves. So of course the question is, you ever see anybody faint when Shabbos leaves? Most people faint the other way around, when Shabbos starts. How many people faint when Saturday night comes? Everybody's got Saturday night plans. Which is another theory of mine, that I think Saturday night fever is an outgrowth of a lot of repressed Jews who after Shabbos, a long Shabbos, decides you got to break out. I don't know, you got to do research. But that's without Chassidus. When you learn Chassidus, you learn Shabbos is the Ikar. But so who feels that? So if you don't feel it, that alone gives you tzad that you don't feel it. So that's why you have psamim. On one level, somewhere you should feel when you take the psamim. Reminds me I should not be feeling so great. You know. So you have tzad that you don't feel. So that's what he's saying. This actually is like, in other words, so brings the pomim, he says, at times, it brings the merirus, that if you feel yourself more than you feel God. Truth is, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said this, Halavai sheyeh lecha meira b'shamayim k'meira b'asar v'dam. His own student on his deathbed, he said, Halavai, you should fear God as much as you fear others. Not mamish hagashatzmi, but yeah. So he said that 2,000 years ago almost.
This concept's probably been around since day one.
Of course. Yeah. The ego wasn't born in the 21st century. No, the Yetzer Hara either.
The Rebbeim sense.
Look, the Rebbe Rashab is acknowledging here in a Maimer that this is the way it is. He's not saying, but at least okay. But al zeh yismarmem me'ed b'nafshe. But this causes you yismarmem me'ed to be very. Mar literally means bitter, but he doesn't mean bitter because usually we use bitter as like someone is bitter at because they're bitter at God or they're bitter at others for some grievance.
Embittered.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, embittered, but it's not really the right word. Mar means bitter, but the bitter has hijacked the real meaning of merirus. Merirus, like when we take morer, by the way, the real meaning of morer is empathy, by the way. It's not about bitterness, it's empathy. That we're empathizing. Well, why would we need to we're empathizing with someone that was in pain, so we're doing something to awaken that. So, but it is, the definition is morer is bitter. You know, they moreru es nafshe, that they embittered their life. There, however, merirus is actually from hard labor. In Chassidus, bitterness here is essentially, I don't want to say the word despondent.
Yeah, the good word, distraught.
Distraught, yeah, that's a good word. Distraught is good. But ultimately, it is a sadness. It's sadness. But good sadness. It's healthy sadness. It's a sadness over a situation. It's like when seeing the sadness that makes you cry that something is not, that people can fall so deeply. No, when we see, for example, it says, God says, do not applaud when your enemies fall, right? You see, when the Mitzrayim were drowning, the Malachim sang, God says, what are you singing? In other words, when you see even terrible people die, obviously that's better than them living, but you don't celebrate it. What you do is you cry that people could fall so far that they needed to be killed because there was no other choice. That's how a divine person looks at it. It's not like, oh, let's dance now, the good has won and evil has lost. The fact that there is evil, it pains. Pain is also a good word. It's like it's a psychic pain. What he says in Tanya is also similar. He says in Perek Yud about Tzadi Gomer, that he hates Ra. So people misunderstand. The word sinna, again, is hijacked like merirus. Hate is a negative. Hate, when you hate something, it's not a good sign. A tzaddik doesn't hate things. He is so much in love with godliness that anything else he despises, but not a personal despise. It's like it repulses him. It's repulsion when God is concealed. It's disturbing is really the right word. Disturbing. I'm saying technically sin is defined as hate, but it doesn't mean hate in the personal sense. Because when we mean hate crime, personal hate. I hate you. It's completely not what it means here. This is far more of a cosmic type of dislike, so to speak, of the situation, not of the individual, of the situation. Right. Sinus chinam is exactly right. So that type of sin is really the love of God is what causes you to dislike or be repulsed or disturbed by anything that's not godliness. That's essentially the point.
Why do you? What can I ask him?
You want to bring a Litvish
why do you go
interpretation of sinna?
You're right. Why do you go to such? How do you know that? How did you know that?
Because I can see, I could tell.
You ask permission to ask a question.
Right.
No, also it's just the shitase.
Why did you go to such lengths? Why did you go to such lengths to try to soften the word sinna? I mean,
why? Because now I'm going to such lengths that we should not have human distortions of the Hebrew words. Is what I'm bothered by.
No, but can it be that it actually means to be hateful of klippus and of sitrach, of anything that supposes godliness?
To me, the word hate and God and tzaddik don't go together in one sentence.
I understand it, but I'm asking from the other side. Maybe
No, but your maybe is based on what? On a human interpretation of hate. Why?
maybe it's
Let's begin with no assumptions.
right.
No assumptions. It says you never knew the word hate. Okay, you're a newborn child.
Right.
You don't even know what the word means. Then in Torah it says hate ra. How would you interpret it? Not how adults interpret it. You'd make an interpretation. It's a pure interpretation. What I'm against, what I'm fighting, what I'm adamant about is not to allow human. It's like anthropomorphism. You don't want humans defining God. When it says God got angry, tell me, what does that mean? It's like my father got angry and got out of control, or my teacher got angry who's dysfunctional, or whatever it is.
No, that's true. That's about
So it's a good point you bring, but let me tell you, words like anger, hate, vengeance, the whole list are all human. They're all hijacked by human beings. I guarantee you make a free association with all those words, you'll have all human interpretations. Not one of them will be a divine.
Hebrew Bible say God is vengeful.
But the other way, Dibra Teira B'Lashon B'nei Adam. Okay, no.
It does say in the comment, it does in Torah, it does say all these things.
But it doesn't mean it should be controlled by Lashon B'nei Adam. It means use the language of a human being to explain. So fine. Want to know something? If I rewrote the dictionary, I would write a different definition of sinna. And that's been, who says Lashon B'nei Adam is what... today you use the word, and I'm saying this adamantly because I have direct experience. The word God, for most people, this is their knee-jerk reaction. Anger, dogma,
Resentment.
punishment, vengeance. I can go on and on. Everything opposite of what God really is, from my point of view. So you could say, okay, so you're going to start saying, no, let's really explain when we say God is angry. So you have to really say, because anger is a human term, and we're applying human terms to God, which is the opposite of the whole purpose. You know what? Look, it's language.
That human.
I'm a person of language. No. What you're doing now, I'm asking you a question. Why do you insist on trying to bring the human definition of hate, which is so negative, to God? That's my question. Why are you insisting on that?
No, I'm not saying to God. I'm saying we should redirect that hate that we have people have within them towards something that opposes godliness.
Let me ask you, psychologically speaking, you think most people that hate, there's any redeeming element to that hate? Most people. Not a tzaddik. Most people's hate, is anything redeeming?
It does say tachlis sinas nesim. It says
No. Who says sinna means hate? Because you know English. If you didn't know English, you wouldn't call it hate. Maybe you would call it something else. Let me ask you a question. What does mitzvah mean? How do you define a mitzvah? Most people say commandment. Who says commandment? Mitzvah means a connection. Tzavsa v'chibur. That's the pirush hapashut to mitzvah. So connection and commandment are very different words. Since when are you? Why is it a given that the English translation is the right translation? You're making it sound like that sinna means hate. Who says sinna means hate?
There are connections.
all languages are only in English. Right?
I think if you go back to the word hate, you probably find in Latin it probably doesn't even mean hate. If you really go, even Latin, not talking about Hebrew. Most words that become our slang of words for things are not necessarily even its original meaning in English, let alone Hebrew. Language is critical here because language is, language is who controls the message. The society that has created an image around a word hate, or Torah and God. That's why I'm so adamant. I'm very adamant with this.
People think it's repentance instead it means to return. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's a very key. And there are things that are very blatantly. What does it mean that God became angry? Tell me. It says Vayichar af.
He pretended he was angry, like a tati, maybe. He was supposed to with his kids,
Fine, you could say that to your children when they go to sleep. I don't know if that's the Chassidus would say. But what does it mean?
But it never says sinner by Hashem. It never says the word sinner. It says Vayichar, but it doesn't say sinner.
May say sinner. What's the difference? So what?
Because the human trait of sinner, the way we defined it, it should be redirected towards something that opposes godliness.
I don't know. No, I would say that the word sin is not hate. If you asked me, I would say it has a different meaning. I mean, and I don't know why you're saying it means hate. What's your yesod for that? Did Moshe Rabbeinu told you sin means hate? How do you know? Because someone in English decided to translate it that way? Why do you assume anything? I don't assume anything when it comes to language. Maybe it doesn't mean hate. Maybe wherever it says sin, it doesn't mean hate.
That's the way it's given down to us for 2,000 years.
In English?
No, in Hebrew, lisno, it means to hate.
Again, who says it means hate? I don't understand. Why do you say the word hate?
Okay, that's
Well, no, I'm asking a very simple question. A basic question. Who says hate is the right word? Maybe it means to be repulsed. Maybe it means to be disturbed. How do you know it means hate? My definition of hate is hate crimes. People hate each other. Sinas chinam. That's where I would use hate. I have a problem when I hear when a tzaddik hates Ra, like we hate each other. I don't know. I can't relate those two words. Doesn't make sense.
Sinas chinam is the same word that we say sinner.
Okay, but that's the only place that I would apply. But all the other places, when you say a tzaddik hates Ra, would you say it's a similar way a person hates another?
How we came to that conclusion?
I don't know. I probably wouldn't even use. What's your point? You're using one, and therefore you apply sin everywhere that way. No, I would not do that.
Okay. You don't have to.
Anyway, I'm very adamant in this. I'm talking. I ask you. You have to have a source for a definition of a word. You can't just use a word which elicits other meanings. It may not mean hate. Just like mitzvah doesn't mean connection, or tshuva doesn't mean repentance. Most people translate tshuva repentance. By the way, why don't you just go with most people's consensus? So okay, so fine. And if the Rebbe would have said the same thing with sin, you would accept it. Fine, I'm not the Rebbe, so I can't speak with that authority, but I speak with my own authority.
I'm just saying, I totally agree with you.
I don't have a problem. Who said the word? No, I understand. As long as hate is controlled by a meaning that I think is not associated with the original topic, I'd be very difficult to channel it. It's probably better to find another word. Remember, words are just words. English means nothing. English doesn't have any value except what its message is. The Hebrew word, we're not going to change. But it's a very good question. By the way, you have the same issue with almost anything. Define Havaya, Elohim, God. You tell me one word.
It does say,
there are places it says saint. It says more than once. It says the word. I asked the question. Vayichad af. Hold on. This, you know the expression anthropomorphism?
Yeah.
It means you can't apply to God human traits. What Debra Teda B'Loshen Ben Adam does not say apply to God human traits. It says in order to relate to God, like the Spheris. In order to relate to God, he's giving mishalim, metaphors of things we can think. Right. Tell me, what means Vayichad af? And you'll see exactly where I'm going with this. What does it mean that God is angry? And you'll see why this is so critical.
It's let down.
So Chassidus goes and explains that Vayichad af means like ocher. It's like someone turning your back to you. It's distance. It means distance, detachment. When a lakus is detached or concealed, that's called anger. Not good to get angry. You don't try to apply a principal in school getting angry at his students or some other person getting angry. Healthy or not healthy. God doesn't get angry. What do you mean gets angry? He's emotional? He lost himself? Anger means that something happened that created detachment. 1 second, I want to say something. And as a matter of fact, psychologically, once you know the real meaning of a yichar, you can apply that to, let's say, relationships. Let's say a husband and a wife get angry at each other. What's really happening? There's where I would go. I would detach the personal anger from the detachment. He did something to me, she'll say, that I cannot forgive. What's really happening? What you really want to get to is let's not personalize. Let's get away from your sentiment. What's really happening is he basically betrayed you. He did something that disconnected himself from you. That's really, so it helps you actually help people manage anger when you know what it really means. If you just let it be, anger just took over, and like I'm now angry and nobody can talk to me, then there's nothing you can do with it. When you dissect anger and you break it down to its core element, it's a detachment. That's what it really is. So the healthy anger would be if a parent, not out of control, wants to show his child that you did something that is wrong, so that the parent will do something deliberately, not out of control. Not you start yelling because you defied me or because it's my ego. Deliberately will show something. But that's not anger in the same way that most people define. Most people define anger as out of control anger, rage. Like someone just has a tantrum. That's not God's anger. God's anger is a state of consciousness or a state of concealment, if you wish. So the truth is that's really how you want to deal with all sentiments. So I agree with you. When you say sinah, the real meaning of hate is really that this is something that is completely anti-God, and therefore you are repulsed, despised, disturbed. But if you let anger be the word that dominates, most people are not going to take it. They'll say, oh, okay, tzaddikim are these angry, the people living in Meir Sharim that are angry at the secular world, like the Arab Muslims are, and they're ready to kill everybody. That's what most people define as religious anger. They say religious people are angry. Not what you're talking about. That's why I'm so against that word. Because I know what they mean. They mean anger, like, you guys are narrow-minded, condescending. No one, people don't do it your way. You want to have it your way, so you're angry. You yell and spit at girls. You yell and spit at anyone and throw stones at them. Anger in the worst possible sense. That's how it's understood. What I'm saying is not my creation. This open up any newspaper. That's how they define anger. Religious rage, Muslim rage, religious rage. They see it as the most primitive of feelings. And by the way, it is. Most people who have that type of anger, it's not coming from a godly place. It's coming from a very selfish, narrow place. It's not coming a divine thing. They dress it up in divine. Anyway, this is a matter of language, and language, fine. A language should always be challenged, by the way, because language is the biggest trap. Words are the biggest trap.
So we have to be inspired in language?
100%. Yeah. Every word you say, many of the words we say are just loaded words that mean nothing. It's just what the culture has created, and you don't think about it even. Chassidus too. Ask most people what means a tzaddik bein in Russia. Tell me what they'll say. What is a tzaddik bein in Russia? And you tell me that the definition even makes sense. And Tanya, by the way, Hitaka doesn't let tzaddik bein. It's not just a righteous person, intermediate, and a wicked. Right? That's not the definition in Tanya. Right? Far, far, much more complex than that. But most people will say that's what they'll say. It's righteous, wicked, and in between. Whatever that means.
Chacham, Russia, Tam.
Right.
We have that, like
or even look how many things we've gone through here. What does Chachma mean? What does Bina mean? What does Keiches Levushim? Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Language is a big trap. You have to learn to always, what can I say? Especially when you learn Chassidus, you learn that language is simply a handle. It's a metaphor. You're using a word to try to identify a concept or a sentiment or energy, really. And then when that word doesn't work, you have to find another word. Simpler. You can't be bound to words. There's no such thing as worshipping words. You see this consistently. And you have to really get to the feeling. When you say mamala kalam, you shouldn't be thinking of a word mamala kalam. You should be thinking, what kind of energy is this? An immanent energy, a manifesting energy, a pnimi. That's how you should be thinking. So really, you don't want words to be the control, like just a symbol. You want a word to elicit a feeling. If it doesn't elicit a feeling, most likely you don't get it. You don't get it. Same thing when you say Havaya, you say Elikim. What does it mean? So we all have of course the technical definition. Havaya is Rachamim, Elikim is Gvura. But it's when you understand what does that mean, Rachamim, Gvura.
It's like saying red or blue to a blind person doesn't elicit any feeling to him.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So for us, when we say
and in general, all language. Look, we learned it before. We learned that to understand godliness, you want to use the language of the world to understand something that's beyond the world. Look, even right here, what we're learning with Psari Echzal Lakah. She's saying the life force inside the body is the ikr. So that's teaching you the life force inside of existence. That is a concept. It's not just the word neshama or chayis. It means something. That's what I'm saying. Chassidus is no way you can do this quickly. You have to think of every word you're saying. It's a constant struggle. That's why it's so hard. Even nigla, you don't have to do that. Nigla of words are once there's a word for something, that's the word you use forever. But even there, if you really learn Gemara well, and you start saying, what's a kinyan? You start analyzing, it's not just a word. A kinyan has many aspects to it, this aspect, that's when you really understand the concept. Any intellectual system is really taking a word and trying to understand deeper nuances and meanings. You can never be trapped by a word. That's a whole study of itself. There were linguistic philosophers who just words is the main thing they focused on. What words we use for things.
It's about the feel of
Huh?
It's like davening. You have to think of the concept and not the word.
Yeah. So where are we here? Fine.
Bitterness.
Distraught, we're a little bit distraught this problem.
Distraught. I like sadness a lot. Sadness, I think, is very good. And also, what was the other word we used? Distraught. Too much, too negative for me, but fine.
I
Distraught.
think sadness is less negative than distraught.
Sadness, because it relates. You know, a tzaddik is sad that there's golus. The tzaddik is sad that someone is sad that God is concealed. You cry over it.
What would be the Hebrew word for that?
Upset.
Yismarmer ba'ed b'nafshe.
Mismarmer. Mismarmer would be the word for sad.
He said, it's not my words. It's
No, I understand mismarmer, but I've never thought of mismarmer as being sad.
well, Tanya Meridus, how do you define Meridus? Bitterness? It's not a good translation.
Upset.
It's sadness mostly. It's a sadness as opposed to depression. Sadness, depression versus depression. That's even the translations, they do that.
Okay, I guess I'm getting...
It's like existential sadness.
They're popular, but you get sad and depressed mixed up.
Okay, so that's for sure not depressed. No. I'm not talking about depressed here at all. Atzvus is that. It's like, look, Onav and Shuffle, right? Is humble and slow self-esteem. Very different, right? They're also confused. But you see, there's Vayamaru Nafshe. There, it's clearly they was hard labor. It was hard labor. That's not this mirrors here.
That's not sadness.
No, that there I wouldn't translate that. There you could say embittered them, pressed them. Yamaru, they were embittered. Yeah, it's fine. But in Hebrew, there's nothing wrong with a word having several different meanings used in different
They
contexts.
weren't depressed. They weren't depressed.
No, that would not be depressed. That would be they were tortured. You know, that was a real. I mean,
How can that be depressed if you're tortured all the time?
I don't know what you mean by the word again. You get using your own word depressed. Depressed is anything. Look in Tanya. So there's an element that they were demoralized, and they said they couldn't even hear Moshe because of Veda Kosha and the Ketzer Ruach. There's nothing wrong that words can have several meanings and several. You see how many times I take a word and I translate it 4 or 5 different ways, and they're all fine. How do you translate bittul? It's one word I've been struggling with my whole life. So I always say, whenever I say bittul, I say there's no real accurate translation. It's a combination of humility, modesty, selflessness, even called subjugation. But I use the best definition I have is suspension of self. Suspension of self. And you have to explain it with examples, or else people don't know what it means. Because bittul can come across as nullification. Like bittul b'shishim, there, it's actually a negative. It's like disappearing, annihilation. Bittul can be annihilation. Bittul ilam. No, not bittul ilam, that's not good. But bittul can be used in a very negative way. So it's a critical word to explain to Chassidus that bittul is a positive. It means suspending your state of self, your state of being, in order to absorb something higher than yourself. That's real definition of bittul. But then some places in Chassidus, bittul hayesh, bittul mitzias, it's not all the same. It all depends where it's used and what context. I'm just giving you an example of a word that you're not going to find one English word that equals bittul. No way. There's no word. Maybe suspension. But again, it's not a direct translation. It's an explanation. There are a lot of words that are like this. I could show you a lot because I deal with it all the time. Try to constantly achdus. So unity, everybody says, right? Is it unity? Is it integration? Is it fusion? Is it synthesis? Is it harmony? Is it all the above? And you'll see different places. I didn't just come up with these words. I think about this. I write and I think about, what does it mean? And when you do this, you start realizing that you're not trying to find. I'm not looking to trap it into a word. I'm looking to convey the again, because you get trapped to the word, you're going to lose the theme. Sometimes you want to capture what is. Say Agdus Hashem. It really comes down to what you're talking about. You're talking about Agdus Hashem, that God is one. Or you're talking about Agdus, that there's God's unity in existence. It's different. Right. There's a lot. So it all comes down to context. Very many people call me or very often say, "What do you translate a word?" I always tell them, "Send me the paragraph." There's no way you can translate a word. I mean, obviously you can technically translate, but one of the things I'm doing with IM Bays online is taking words and like a glossary, like a new type of dictionary. I look like Rabbi Shachat's, Emmanuel Shachat's mystical concepts and chassidus, printed in the back of some of the Tanyas. So there, which is a very thorough, very good job. But language there is also limiting. He has his words, and sometimes the words in English is almost as complicated as the word in Hebrew, so it doesn't help. So yesh ma'ayin, creation ex nihilo. right? What does that mean? It's almost it's as
Real.
cryptic
That's what we learned Tanya.
as Yesh Ma'ayin is. When you learn here, you start saying Yesh Ma'ayin. That's not something from nothing. It's not even the right word. Nilo is nothing. It's like nihil, nihilistic. It's actually not a good word. Technically, it's correct. That's what it means in the Latin expression. That's how you say. Yeah, but
It's not contextual.
Look, a lot of my work that I do, most of my work is really translation, but not translation as literal, but conceptual translation. To explain, you have to explain the idea to be true to the source, but you can't be true. You can't be locked to the words, or else you're never going to have a true conveying. Look at any Tanya translation; it's accurate literally, but you can't. It's as dense as Tanya is, because there's no explanation for anything, and words are not just in English; they're not just equivalent in Hebrew. See, in Tanya, you say Nefesh Elikis, divine soul, is not the same thing.
It has to be that Tanya is talking about such lofty matters that the English.
No, I understand the value of a literal translation. I understand that.
The English language doesn't have words to describe such lofty matters.
I disagree with you. Language, good. You ever read good writers in English, in French? Good writers convey things that you'd be shocked at how good they can convey if it's written right.
Even things of the
Takes a lot more words, though.
Yes.
Takes a lot more words.
Anything. It takes more words and takes more work. By the way,
spiritual beings and creations and.
Why not? I would say to you that when you read it in English, you'll begin to understand it in Hebrew.
No, in English.
So don't get trapped in the Hebrew. The Hebrew is, if it's explained right. If it's not explained right, obviously not. That's a challenge. I mean, a lot of what we're doing here is doing that. It's trying to understand these concepts. Well, Esespheres Hagnuzes, go explain Esespheres Hagnuzes without chapters of explanation. There's no way. What are you going to say? 10 hidden spheres? First of all, what are spheres? That alone is. Then what are hidden spheres?
Here are the 10 we know.
10. Okay, we had a good beginning. We know the
10
number.
and 9. 10
Right.
and 11.
There you go. That's a good beginning. Something to begin with. Yeah.
No, sometimes I think bittul, the word bittul in the Russian language, like there's such coarse people. Why should they ever have the word bittul in Russian? You know.
In America, they're also quite coarse, and they also don't have a word for bittul.
Bittul was invented in Russia.
I always say that when I say bittul, there's no word. I say because maybe the English language doesn't tolerate the concept.
Yeah. You can only reach out to here.
So there's no word for something you don't relate to.
Has seen it to the concept.
Look, this is. If you remember, I think the first class I ever gave, and I've said it several times, language is everything. This is the first step. I would not even begin to teach Chassidus to any class or anything without a long discussion on language. As I said to you, just look at the legal contracts. What's the first page of any legal contract? It's all about language. What's what? You have to know what your terms are. If you don't have the terms, then later someone will say, "Oh, you meant that? Oh, I thought you meant that." You know. I still can't figure out what a plaintiff is, but that's another story. Which one is? I'm always trying to figure out. Plaintiff is this side or that side? You know.
You know what a defendant.
And I'm not the only one. We all have the same. You know, like.
You can figure out what a defendant is. You can figure out what a plaintiff is.
Right. Some word, maybe I'm just not made out to be a lawyer. I guess for them it comes very easy.
Call your French Manada.
The best. So language is big. So 1 second. Okay, I don't know what we're up to. So these smarman ba'ed b'nafshe. Look, when the Frieder Rebbe Rashab at 5-6 years old, began to cry when he went into the Tzemach Tzedek. Why does God not reveal Himself? What's he crying for? Forget about the answer. What's he crying? It's like that person who was by the Friedrich Rebbe. So the Friedrich Rebbe used to cry terribly by Tkir Shefer, Rosh Hashanah. Like, you could hear it down the block. That's how loud it was. And so someone came there. It was a Yeke, a German guy, Jew, and said, he asked somebody, why is he crying? He has such a beautiful wife and beautiful family and children, so many chassidim. Can understand why he's crying. In other words, he understood crying. You cry when you lose money, or you lose your job, or you don't have nice people around you. There's what we call tears of just existential loneliness. I once said that in a talk I gave, and someone came over and says, "Don't use that word. Every time you use it, it makes me cry." Existential loneliness. It's like what it says in Rizal says that anyone who doesn't cry in the Sesame Tshuva, his neshama is not complete. What does it mean? Not because you're crying over a lack. It's just a sense. You sense a concealment. You sense there's something bigger to reality, and it's just not there. So everybody has moments where you have a certain type of tears like that. That's what I would define here, the merirus here. So it's completely opposite of anything you would think is bitter or angry. It's ultimate, such a subtle type of tear, because completely not due to any it's not due to any problem. It's due to a fundamental Helen Behester, even without a Holocaust. Just the mere fact that you can walk the streets and people don't realize there's a God can make a person like this cry. That's what he's talking about here. Okay, so sometimes we can't cry over that, so at least we cry that we don't cry over this. Is also something. Ba'aveda Yeshara, however, in a direct Aveda, Hainu Ba'aveda Kedeboy Lemeheva, an Aveda that's really complete. Kedeboy means Kedeboy means V'zdav Tzazayin. How do you translate Kedeboy Lemeheva? As the proper. Gemara is Lashon the Gemara. Kedeboy Lemeheva means something that's complete, like
as it's meant to be.
It's meant to be? Okay.
Properly.
Yeah.
Situation.
Complete, maybe. So the Chliyas meizbonasan al aveda b'simcha. So he's qualifying. He says this contemplation, that the reality of existence is the divine energy that gives it life. And that's what you desire and long for. Not the yesh should be revealed, but the chayis saliki should be revealed. That also at times brings a pain. Pain is also maybe a good word. Pain or merirus. But Aveda Yeshara, meaning in a direct Aveda, or Aveda is properly, this contemplation is Aveda b'simcha.
If you're not doing tshuva.
Is really one that should be b'simcha, joy. In parentheses, he adds, V'hameridas tzarich li is kedem atfila b'tikkun chatzos. And the meridas we're talking about, that has to be before the davening, meaning before the morning prayer, b'tikkun chatzos, by midnight. He's not negating that it brings meridus, but he's saying that's not the main aveda in this bonus he's talking here in the morning davening, which is really simcha. What's the simcha? The simcha of wanting and longing to Holocaust. So he's going to say, okay. Oh yeah, okay, you say.
He said it's after, so you can't have meridus and simcha at the same time.
No. Why are you saying that? Why not?
It says it's the meridus is kind of...
No, he said that at times this morning contemplation will bring to merirus, but the main time for merirus is tikkun chatzos, not then. That's what he said.
But it's coming from the contemplation, right?
No. What? He says this contemplation brings a person to really desire Elokus. At times, l'pamim, it will bring to merirus, but merirus really doesn't belong then. That's when, then really has to be simcha. Merirus belongs on tikkun chatzos at night.
It's before though, right? Before
Kedem atfila. Before the prayer.
And the actual tefillah has to be the simple.
But at times it brings merirus. What's the problem? I don't understand the problem. At times it will bring merirus. That contemplation in the morning by davening will bring at times pain, sadness. But that's not. But derech aveda yeshara, meaning the direct aveda, the more appropriate approach. Shemeseder ba'avel alakus. That's what it does. That it awakens or arouses a love to godliness and a desire that you should desire a revelation. And also, similarly, he also desires greatly to immerse in learning Torah and performance of mitzvahs. Because through this, you draw down and transmit and radiate the divine light. That's why he commits himself. He mobilizes himself. He dedicates himself. Yeah, commits himself. Gives himself over to the kiyum, to the performance of Torah mitzvahs. And the same thing, his dedication is that all the things that he needs, meaning that's like the necessities of life, food, drink, and so on, tachas kavanase, the ultimate purpose of it is to the godliness in it. In other words, he's dedicated to finding godliness in everything he does, So it's besides so three things. It awakens and arouses a love for desire and desire for the revelation. It awakens and desire for basic Torah mitzvahs, which brings this revelation, and also the reshus, basically the things in the necessities of life. The karaklis is not just do it, but he wants the elikus in it. Tachlis kavanah, his intention is to find the godliness in everything. Like we say in eating and drinking. Not on bread alone does a person live. On the spark of the divine, and the expression of the divine in it. That's the meitzi, that's the divine energy within the food. With this sustains a human being. With this, a human being is sustained in lives. And in addition that it sustains him, it also gives him more light and energy and life force, divine, in his Torah and Aveda. It also strengthens him, in other words, to do Torah and Aveda. Now he's saying this. So he's finished this second level of contemplation in the Chayis, and how it sustains you and enlivens you. And that brings Ava, that you really want it into Torah mitzvahs and so on. The previous is Baranus, was Achkikim Bachutz, that Yesh Ma'ayin. And how existence comes into being. And this is far more internal. Now he's saying like this. So we have the two things. He doesn't say Mepchikim Befnim, but I guess that's what he meant. Maybe he's going to say it. Now through an extended an intensive, abundant effort, exertion, effort, over a period of time. In other words, you need a sustained time period and effort in this Aveda that we just discussed, in contemplating on the chayis, on the life, on the energy and life force, the divine life force in the worlds, and the way that manifests, until to the extent that all this becomes united, integrated, and totally one. Misatzim means when something becomes completely part of your core. That's like that he now stands at this level in his Aveda. He's reached this level of Aveda. Then he can come afterwards the Madrega Gevay Yeser. He can reach an even higher level. That means that he comes to a contemplation, to a comprehension that's higher than the above comprehension. And what is that? That all the above that we learned, that we contemplated on, is only a reflection. That's infinitely distant from Atzmos. So all this is all Eir, as he said before. It's all Eir. Because it's all manifesting in existence. So he comes now, but this requires a lot of time and has to become united, fused with him. Then, and this is also included in Baruch Shamar. Because you say Omar only once. It says Baruch Shamar Omar, one Amira. That one Amira, one utterance, all the worlds were created. So Baruch Shamar V'Elam, in other words, includes contemplation one, which is what he said, the Yesh Ma'ayin, that matter does not create itself, but it is created by an ayin. But it also comes to tell us that ayin is only a reflection, and it's only one utterance compared to Atzmos. So it's now a higher level you're reaching a higher level. Even though everything comes from him, from you, even though it says that everything comes from you, so even though everything comes from him, it's all coming only from a light and reflection from Atmos. And not only in the lower worlds is it a reflection. Also, the energies in the higher worlds, even what he said before, Ak and Bia, Klolim, Apratim, and everything, is only a reflection that's infinitely distant from Atzmus. Now it comes a new level. Now through this becomes a Teikef Harotze. It's a new word, he didn't say, an intense yearning. To become encompassed in Atzmus Ein Sof. But you can't get to this without the first step, because first you have to contemplate on the Eir. Not only that he does, before we said what was he didn't want, he doesn't want to have the chitzenius of the world, which is the glove, because it's just a yesh. He wants to have the life force in it. Now he's saying not only does he not want the outer world, the external, even the giluyim that before he wanted, the revelation of the divine is also, that's not ultimate desire. The ultimate desire and will, Baruch Hu, is an Atzmus Ein Sof.
You were like,
Yeah.
You didn't say so.
Yeah.
That was the Atzmus Ein Sof.
The Atzmus Ein Sof, right.
So it's like the Atzmus of the Eir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
V'zeu b'beizei fanim. And this desire is in two ways. Or he wants to be encompassed in a state of kiloyin, which means he's completely absorbed by it, consumed. Yeah, kiloyin. Or he wants that the Atzmus should be drawn down to him, and that's why he commits and dedicates himself to the performance of Torah mitzvahs. But not in order for the drawing down of the reflection, but only for the bit hamshachas atzmus. In other words, it's either being completely consumed consumed by it, or to draw down atzmus, but not because he wants it, but he wants atzmus to be present. Not because he wants the gilui, the ha'ara. So either way works. In other words, atzmus is the dominant element. Either you're absorbed by it, consumed by it, or that's what mamayel lamat.
even a mitzvah without kavanah, you'll get that second way. So
I don't know about that. I don't think that's what he's saying here at all. Because he's saying this comes after a ribui, what do you call it? Ribui yegiyah, b'shkida, b'meshech zman. I don't see that as being just doing a mitzvah without kavanah.
After much
This is after many kavanas. He's climbing here. You can't get to Atzmus without bypassing all these Giluyim levels.
So what's the timeline over here, page 295?
The timeline?
Yeah. Talking about
When he says Meshech Zman, what does he mean?
like,
Okay, this we need to debate.
first 20 years.
I guess it depends who's reading it. Depends who they're talking about. Okay, let's continue here.
10 seconds.
What time is it? What time?
10:40.
Okay. I'm going to finish the chapter already. Okay. Well, the Milam is okay. So we have already 3 levels here, at least, that I've identified. One is the contemplation, klali, yesh mayin. That's Baruch Shama V'Elam, all those levels. The yesh from the ayin. That brings chikika b'chutz, a kiruv, a closeness that you want to. That's chikika, the outer chiseling. Then comes his bonus benafshe hergish within, that you feel the energy, the ha'ara inside of you, and you want the revelation within. And now we came, after a long period of that, after a long period of Aveda like that, you want that, you realize that's all one ha'ara, and that's not enough. You want Atzmus itself.
Are we saying at the lower level is only Hamshacha Ha'or by Torah Moses?
I don't know what you mean. Say it in English, if you don't mind. I don't know what it means ha'ara of Torah mitzvahs.
I'm not sure what it means either. We think generally.
So why using those words?
Let me explain. So we usually say that South Hebrew, you have a joining connection with the Eibishter, with the Atzos of the Eibishter when you do a mitzvah. But now we're saying now that he doesn't just want the Ha'or, the shine, the radiation. We're saying he wants the Atzos of the Eibishter when he does Torah mitzvahs. So they're actually different.
I understand. I'm not. What? Say again.
We generally say that the connection to a person, to God, when he does a mitzvah, is that it's Hashem himself you're connecting with. Okay, now we're saying that when the person is on this higher level of contemplation, he wants the connection to be that deeper way.
Well, he's not talking here about doing mitzvahs. That's not this chapter. This chapter is about his bonus and Ava v'Yira, those mitzvahs of Ava and Yira. He's not talking about mitzvahs in this chapter.
Not talking about mitzvah. It does say definitely though that
He says that no, when you want to have the gilui, therefore you do mitzvahs, because mitzvahs draw down that gilui. That was step one. Then he says, now here we just said, was that because he wants atzmus, so he commits himself to Torah mitzvahs, not in order to have the reflection of Alikus, but to have atzmus down below.
Right. Does that imply a change in the what you get?
I'm saying this. We're not talking here. This chapter is not about what mitzvahs accomplish.
Okay.
This is as a result of this contemplation and wanting to have atzmus. He commits to Torah mitzvahs because he wants to draw atzmus down. That's the point. A different question I can ask is what do mitzvahs do? Mitzvahs can draw down atzmus, but mitzvahs doesn't draw down inside of you. It's very makavdik. That's why you need contemplation. That's you can ask a question: what do you need all this when you can just do a mitzvah and have atzmus? But that's not begili. That's atzmus. You're doing what atzmus wants, but you don't transform the world. You don't transform yourself in that way.
That's what
he's talking about. Ava and Yira and Hizbonus. This is about an internalization. Everything here is an internalizing.
Transformation.
This is basically, in other words, there's Torah, mitzvahs, and tefillah. This is mostly tefillah that he's talking here, not mitzvahs and not Torah. It's a little Torah and tefillah, I would say. Hizbonus and tefillah. And mitzvahs is a different track, which is also necessary, but it's also part of the process with tefillah that you also, like you said, Shema leads you to V'hayim Shemaya, to the mitzvahs. But here the mitzvahs are part of playing the role of bringing down atzmus. That's the Well, the mailam is and now even a fourth level looks like even higher than this. Okay, we got to work on out here. I see.
Yeah.
Hu kasher haizbonusi bahaflo v'aremus da'atzmus ein sof. Because till now, what did he say? It was more of through a negation. Yeah. Because through a negation. That, in other words, with all that, it's only a reflection, only one amira, one utterance. Now his contemplation is on the hafla, the wonder, the awe, reimamus, the exaltation of atzmus ein sof, of the core divine infinite light.
As opposed to the Amshachar?
As opposed to just realizing the art is minimal compared to atzmus. Now he's talking about.
But in the previous sense, the Shi'el Yidei Amshachas Atzmus.
Read a few lines before that because it's only ha'ara.
What, this Amshachas Atzmus is only Ha'ara?
No,
he doesn't know what Amshachas.
Don't read one line. You're reading one line of the whole section. The section there is all about the ha'ara. That's only a reflection.
Right, no, we're
talking about his bonus here. Don't read that last line. We're talking about different levels of contemplation. The level of contemplation, you have to read the line after he said, so there he's contemplating how it's only a reflection and it's only one utterance. And now he's contemplating on the whole awesomeness and exaltation of Atzmus. Loftiness. In the previous contemplation, his whole comprehension and his immersion and his isaskus, his exertion, his effort. Sein ganzer Farnem. His complete Farnem. Farnem means scope. His complete Farnem is scope. Farnem.
Scope? It's involved.
Farnem can mean scope. Farnem also can mean his way he grasps it. It means both. Farnem usually is scope, but it could be also to Farnem, sein ganzer Farnem. What? Yeah, Farnem means both. Farnem is definitely scope. Like horizon.
That's how the way he grasps it, though. That seems like the same.
Scope with his grasp. His complete scope.
But he's saying both. It's really both. Sein ganzer Farnem. Farnem can be his whole involvement. His whole involvement is also, but I don't know if that's what he means. Sein ganzer Farnem. Yeah, it could be his entire involvement as well.
I think that's what it means.
But Farnem often is scope, just for the record. Hu b'ha'ara halakis. There, it's all involved. His grasp is in the reflection, the divine reflection. Rak shezeu, shemizbein eich shezeu ara lavad. It's in the reflection, except that he's contemplating how it's only a reflection.
In relation to Atzmus.
Right. Avokana is bonus hu ba'atzmus ein sof. Here now the contemplation is in atzmus ein sof itself, in the core divine infinite energy, shu mufla merumim, that is removed, or awesome, or lofty, exalted, kameshakasu v'akodesh b'shamayim abaretz. HaKodesh, that he's holy, he's removed, he's like removed from, apart from, in heaven and earth, he's apart from it all. And through this contemplation and sense of God's awesomeness and complete infinite distance, he can come, Yahweh, he comes to an awe and fear, trembling actually, an awe and trembling of Hashem. Yeah, this is Yira, because it's distance. The other was closeness. Remember, the Eir Eliki was what's in close to. Then you come to realize the closeness is only a drop. Then you realize how distant that creates the awe. That's always, awe, Av and Yira is always, in a sense, Yesh Ma'ayin and Gilei Helam of Atzilus. Gilei Helam is always closeness, and Yesh Ma'ayin is distance. Like for example, in the kingdom below, the whole idea of kingship is fear or awe, respect. You shall appoint. Same. Why is the word same tasim? Appoint and double appoint. Because you have to place upon it. So it's like bearing the yoke, bearing the. She says what the word, the explanation is that his fear should be upon you. In other words, the fear of the king, the total subjugation to the king. We have to exalt, elevate to the king, because specifically through that is the yira. Because if you don't exalt him, if he's like you, or he's somewhat commensurate to you, somewhat proportionate, then what's there to be an awe of? So the Reimamus, through that comes the Yira. U'kamayim Razal. That's the Maimon Razal, Shetei Moshe Lech and all that. I guess that's all the part of the Lashon of Razal, probably. Kamoy Kain L'mayla Days Bonus Baflos, what I'm saying. So, the same thing in the Malchus L'mayla, in the contemplation, in the awesomeness and the loftiness or exaltedness of Ein Sof Nasim Mizeh HaYira V'Pachad Hashem. So this becomes the Yira and Pachad. Okay, so we have the fourth level now. 4 levels. Maybe it's the 4 levels of davening. Baruch Sha'amar, Berchus Krishma Shema Shmanesa. But he said the third one, he said, was also Baruch Sha'amar. Okay. But you can't jump to this without, you first have to have the contemplation in the reflection of the divine, reflection, that he should understand well, comprehend well, the detailed levels, and the core, their inherent distinction, their levels, and malos, and their quality, that has in it many great and lofty levels. Many. From that, through this, you'll then come to the next step of the hafla, the awesomeness and the exaltedness of the Ein Sof, and which will bring him to Yira. Now he's saying there's another Yira that comes from step 1, from the contemplation of creation and existence of world. That also comes from, we said, from Atzmus. From the fact that God has that ability and the power to create, so falls upon him a Yira Pachad.
This was the very first level, I think.
Yeah, this is. Yeah. He's saying there's another Yira that comes, but he's going to distinguish. That the whole land feared from God, Me Hashem. Before he said a different word. He said, what do you say? HaKadosh b'shamayim v'aretz, right?
Yes.
Yeah, HaKadosh b'shamayim v'aretz. Okay. Ki hu amar vayehu. Because he said, and it came to being. So by Baruch Shamar v'haya olam, that also brings if you really think about it, an awe of a fear of God. But Zeh Yirah Tata. This is a lower Yirah. Why? Because that Yirah is coming from a general contemplation. It doesn't come through all these levels that bring you to a different appreciation of Atzmus. But the Yirah that comes mitzad Reimumus, where you appreciate the quality, because it only can be appreciated after you appreciate the Ha'ara. Because you're appreciating God. That their first step is you just recognition that the Yesh had to come from an Ayin. So Atzmus is very powerful. That's all you know. Here you're appreciating because you're appreciating all the levels that he put into place, and all that is Ayin, is all a reflection of the Etzem. This brings to Yireh Ilah. Look, he doesn't explain what Yireh Ilah and Yireh Tata is. We need to discuss that. But let's first read it, and then we'll see. And when he's contemplating, no, it's continuing. When he contemplates that Atzmus Ein Sof is below, just like he's above. That even though Atzmus, the core, the infinite divine light, is completely separate from the lower and higher worlds, because he's completely removed, that itself is the reason that he's below, just as he is above. Like it says, Hamakbil L'Shevis, which means he raises himself up to sit down on the throne. Hamashpili, so his legs descend, Liris B'Shemayim V'Aretz. I don't know if it says legs there. No, Hamashpili. So as he lifts himself up to sit on the throne, he also, Mashpili, the expression is that, yeah. Because he's so high, that's why he can be everywhere. If he was not so high, then he could belong. So he belongs in the high level, he's not in the low level. But because he goes up higher, he's beyond high. In other words, therefore, that itself, he understands that allows him to be in both equally. So this is already talking about Atzmus, the Reimumus of Atzmus. And through this comes even a deeper internal awe. I don't know, this may be Yireh Ilah.
This is Yireh Ilah.
Yeah. Because he's not just thinking that God is so awesome that he created existence, he's not creating that God is here just like he's there, he's beyond it all. Yeah. The Gamla Zetzichem is bonus faflo vadim is nein and sof. And also this requires a contemplation in the awesomeness and exaltedness of the divine infinite light. Because from this he'll come to understand how he descends to see. How is it that he finds himself below just as he is above? And also in order to get to the Etzem Hayirah, to the actual awe, you need to have this contemplation, comprehension and contemplation of this divine exaltedness. Mashpil, to cast down. Mashpili means to lower. To cast down. I have to look at the Mashpil. It looks like a Mashpili that he lowers himself to look at what's going down in heaven and earth.
He casts down the haughty.
Hamagbil L'Shevis, L'Chim HaMashpili Lires.
Because when he goes on the throne, he is so high, therefore he has a panoramic view, he can even see to the lowest levels.
That's probably what it means, something like that. I mean, Ruchnis, it means because he's so beyond higher and lower, so he's below just as much as he is above.
Yeah. It's all equal.
No, yeah. Let's do the Kitzur. This needs explanation, we'll explain it. The ultimate purpose, there should be the feelings and emotions of love and awe, and through contemplation specifically. The tchila is bain. Here comes the steps. The tchila is bain, and yeah. So, in the beginning, you contemplate bisavas hayesh muchlich shumayin. In the creation of the yesh, that it compels us to say it comes from ayin. The yesh mugbal murkav, because the yesh is both defined, is both finite and a compound. He explained that, yeah. And then he contemplates on the quality of the Isavus that's completely beyond us. Did he say that specifically?
That's the
That was stage
I
2.
think we mentioned Ikus.
That was not stage 2. No, that's not stage 2. That was an Atzmus. But, okay. And nevertheless, there's still a Kiruv and Shaykhis. 1 second. He didn't explain what's like. Yeah, he does say in Arech. Yeah.
What's he say?
Yeah, by Echus he says Bein Arech. He says
Yeah, but they not said.
Right, we didn't say the word.
You didn't say the word echos.
He did.
No?
Yeah. Look at the line. Be'echus ha'ayin aliki.
It's funny. There he uses Ikus and later he uses Ofen. I don't know why he uses Ikus in one place and Ofen in another place.
I know, but Ikus Ayin
Yeah. It's the beginning of a line. And nevertheless, you have to read it like in one line. Is infinitely distant. Nevertheless, he's still close and has a relationship. The ayin to the yesh has a relationship. The ein arech lecho dafka, because dafka atzmus is completely apart. That's what he said there.
Still the
Yeah, it was only lecho. V'zeu aydei ishtalshlus. This is through ishtalshlus, because the ayin gets closer and closer to the yesh. V'zeu baruch shama malchus the Ein Sof. That's baruch shama. That's malchus of Ein Sof saying and creating. V'uinyan atik la'ak. That becomes atik of ak. Okay. Baruch hu keser haprati. Baruch hu is keser haprati. Okay. That's... Oh, 1 second. Did he say that? He didn't say that, did he? Said the Maimorim before that. 1 second.
I think it then Baruch Hu became like Malchus of Atzilus, or became Malchus of Kesef Atzilus, or they became Kesef of Bria.
Okay, here he's spelling out a little more than he did in the Pnim. This goes back to chapter 69, because that's he did say it there. So what's Baruch Hu? He says Baruch Hu is Keser HaPrati of Atzilus. Oh, he did say it. No, sorry, I'm sorry. No. Well, Baruch Hu is Keser HaPrati of Atzilus, sorry. Baruch Hu's Keser HaPrati of Atzilus. 1 second. Yeah, I'll go to the Arech. Okay, good. Then the continued Baruch Sham is the Shtas of all the Esesphiras till Malchus. He said till Baruch Merachem al Abrius, and commensurate accordingly to the ayin. That's the yesh. So there's a relationship.
That's an interesting concept.
He said that as well earlier. Yeah. And with this contemplation becomes a closeness to the divine, and that's the chikim ebachutz. That's the chiseling from outside. Huh?
It's all the first one doing it.
Yeah. Achakach, then comes the second. Eich shekol shebekol davar yesh chayes alikiva ikura chayes. The second thing is everything has in it a life force that gives a dynamic life force, and the primary force, the primary element of it is the life force. Umepsari erza, from my flesh I behold. There's a yirtze me'ed ba'gili alakus. And through this, he desires very much to have the revelation. And specifically because of the concealment, like he said in the Psari Erza, when a person's weak, or what do we say? Afflicted. And everything he wants to have, the desire is in the divine within it. At times, from this will also be a certain sadness. But that has to be primarily before davening. And when he becomes he becomes completely joined with this contemplation. He reaches to the understanding that everything is just a reflection. He becomes to understand that it's only one Amir. The whole thing, all these levels, all that we just said, is only one utterance.
Is that the third level?
That's the third level.
From that 2B.
It's 3.
But what do you mean everything is?
V'yirtza lichlul be'alakus, ba'atzmus. And he wants to be encompassed in atzmus. Oy hamshachas atzmus al yedei mitzvahs. Or the second way that he said, or draw down atzmus in the mitzvahs, through mitzvahs. And fourth, ulamaylam is higher than this is bonus by flaws v'reim masayid and sof, in the awe, in the wonder and exaltedness of the infinite light. Shemizet tia hayira. From this will come the awe. Lower yira comes from the power of God in creation, the first step. From the contemplation, how Atzmus and Sof is higher, is below, just as he's above, that will come a far deeper and inner element of yira. Because he's like with us here. He's not just put us here, he's with us here. So we finished chapter 150. Which was, let's just say, which pages did we learn now? We learned 294 through 296. The finish of chapter 150.